Well, my name is Jamie. Welcome to episode 2 of what I'm calling the Experimental Gardener. Today I've been out after work and planted a few more things and worked on a couple more beds. But what I wanted to do today is talk about something that every urban gardener needs to have at least some familiarity with. We don't have the luxury of being able to spread our plants out like we would if we were on a 5-acre plot or something like that out in the county. So all of our plants grow relatively close to each other. That means that we need to have at least some knowledge of what we call companion planting. Now, what that means is that for every vegetable that we plant, there are other vegetables that either benefit it or don't. And so we need to know which vegetables grow well together and which ones do not. For some of them, it's a nutrient relationship. For others, it's pest control or things like that. And so what I've done is I'm going to take a few minutes and just go through some of the companion planting that I've done in my own garden just in the last day or two since the first video. And what I want to do is I want to let you know that this is an easy thing to get a working knowledge of. A quick Google search will let you know what plants grow well with others. If you're going to plant tomatoes, you can just go into Google search and you can search for tomato companion plants, and it will let you know which other vegetables or flowers or whatever the case may be grow well with tomatoes and which plants do not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of minutes and just give you a quick run through of the companion planting I've done so far this year, and then we'll go from there. So let's start with tomatoes. I have 18 tomato plants out, 12 that are just what we call a Bonnie Original. This is the first time I've grown that variety, so I'm not sure how they're going to go. Then I have 6 that are early girls, and early girls are what I grew up on with as a kid. Now, I don't eat tomatoes. I think tomatoes are nasty. But I cook with them, I can them. My grandmother had a killer recipe for sweet tomato ketchup. It's a relish kind of thing, and so I'll take my tomatoes and I'll do those. I'll make the ketchup with it and I give them away. And so when I planted my tomatoes, one of the first things that I did was I picked up a package of radish seeds. Now, radishes, they add a little zest to your salad. Some people like to just eat them raw, but they're really good at helping keep pests off of your tomatoes. So in my row of tomatoes, I just sprinkled out a package of radish seeds, and I'll water them in after a while. And as they grow up, they're supposed to help keep insects off your tomatoes, little cutworms and those kinds of things. Basil is another plant that grows well with tomatoes, and so if you like to make homemade spaghetti sauce, you're going to use basil anyhow. So just grow it right there in your tomato plants, and that's one of the things that you can do to help your tomato plants along, so you don't have to use as many pesticides. In my greens, my salad greens bed, I have celery, sage, and basil all growing together. With romaine lettuce, and just this afternoon I've gone in and I've planted a row of onions in between my romaine lettuce plants. So all of those grow well together. And from what I've read, the rule of thumb kind of is if you eat it together, it will grow together. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it might be worth a few minutes to do a little research on. Spinach is another plant that I have in the garden, and it grows well with cabbage and with lettuce. And so I have a bed that has spinach and cabbage and lettuce growing in it, and I've planted a row of onions in the middle of that bed. Onions are something that you can scatter around your garden, just plant them in different places, and they're beneficial for a lot of things except beans. Do not plant onions with your beans. They don't work together. One of the things I found today as I was planning what I was going to work on this afternoon, I've got a bed that's got just cabbage plants in it. I've got purple cabbage, I've got green cabbage. It's a shaded bed, so I'm hoping that it will be cool enough as the days start warming up that it will continue to allow me to grow cabbage later into the season. And I found out today, and again, experimental garden, we're going to find out how true this is, that rosemary is really good to plant with cabbage plants. Now, if you've ever tried to grow cabbage, you will know that it gets little worms on it, and those little worms will destroy a head of cabbage in just no time. And this rosemary, the scent from the rosemary, is supposed to be a deterrent to the moths that lay the eggs that then grow into those little worms. Whether or not it's true, we'll find out. But this is, being an experimental garden, this is something that I'm wanting to try and see how it works. Cucumbers. I have cucumbers growing next to my patio, actually, because I have a trellis, an arbor kind of thing as you step off the patio. And so I wanted to grow my cucumbers where they would grow vertically instead of horizontally and not take up so much of the floor space of my backyard. So I've planted them next to that trellis, and I found out, again, through a quick little Google search, that kale is a really good companion plant for cucumbers. So I have 4 cucumber plants next to the trellis. I have put out 4 pots with kale seeds in them just this afternoon. We'll see how it goes. I don't mind experimenting with this kind of stuff, and some of it will work, some of it won't, but that's okay. Peppers. I've struggled growing peppers in the past because of a couple of things. There's a fungus that gets right around the base of the stalk, right at the ground. And in years past, I have had the stalks of my pepper plants just rot right at the ground, and they will do it overnight, just instantly almost. And so I've been trying to keep the base of my pepper plants dry so that they can breathe and those kinds of things, to see if that helps with that. Maybe it's something I need to do a little research on and see what exactly is causing it, but I think peppers don't like to have their feet covered. We'll find out. But I did learn today that chives are a good companion plant for peppers. So in the bed next to my cucumbers, which peppers and cucumbers can grow together, I hope, I have also planted some chives. Beans are a great companion plant for a lot of things, because beans are what we call nitrogen fixers. Most plants take nitrogen out of the ground as they grow. Beans take nitrogen out of the air and put it back into the ground. And so you can grow beans with a lot of different plants. In the last video, I quickly mentioned what we call the 3 sisters. And this is a Native American food raising technique where they will grow corn, and then they would grow pole beans that would use the corn as a trellis, and under the corn in the shade they would grow winter squash, butternut squash, acorn squash, those kinds of things. And the 3 are all companion plants, and they thrive off of each other. So that's something I may try this year. I don't love pole beans because they tend to be a little stringy, but I may try it again this year. You just have to have a really strong sweet corn to support the weight of the beans. And like we mentioned just a minute ago, onions. Scatter your onions around your garden. There's a little bug that grows on the roots of the onions, and it'll kill the onions. So if you spread it around, then you have less chance of that actually happening. And so I have, this afternoon, I've planted onions, like I said, in my lettuce bed. I've planted onions in my spinach. I've got a couple other spots that I'm going to plant some onions, but it's starting to rain this afternoon, so I don't know how much more I'm going to be able to do. There's my neighbor Daryl putting his golf cart up. Hey, Daryl. He has already found out that he can reach over the fence to get my tomatoes, and that's totally fine. I can have him all. He can have all the tomatoes he wants. So, if you're going to raise a garden in an urban setting with limited square footage, companion planting is something that you must become at least slightly familiar with. And it's not something you have to read book after book after book about. As you're planting, if you're unsure about whether this plant and that plant will grow well together, just Google it. And you'd be surprised at the information you can find that's out there. So, I wanted to take just a second and talk about why I'm doing all of this. I grew up with a garden. I know a lot of folks may not have, especially folks my age and younger, but we grew up with a garden. I lived out in the county. Most of what we ate, well, maybe not most, but a lot of what we ate, we either grew or we killed. And so hunting and raising a garden was just a way of life for us. And we would grow sweet corn and beans and peanuts and potatoes, and it was a family thing because my grandparents just lived right down the street or right down the highway from us. And a lot of summer days we would spend out in the pine trees in their backyard shelling beans or cutting corn and those kinds of things. And this is just how I grew up. And right now we're in a global pandemic. It's changed the way people live. And the first time I went into the grocery store after all this hit and saw shelf after shelf that was empty, I thought there's got to be a better way. I have to be able to provide for my family. And so that reinvigorated my desire to raise a garden. It got me to go to work. And so, like I said in the last video, I'm building a lot of these beds from scratch. This year is going to be pretty experimental. Next year will be a little better. The next year will be even better than that. But in my little 2,200 square foot backyard, I can raise a lot of the food we will eat during the winter. And so that's kind of my goal with this. And I wanted to show you, if you've ever seen all these videos where folks have these beautiful, big, lush gardens and you thought, I can't do that. Well, yours may not look exactly like that, but you can build a garden that will feed your family and will supplement what you need to buy at the grocery store. You won't be able to completely survive off of what we can grow in our backyards, but if you work it, if you plan it right, and if you really take the time to do a little study to see what grows together, succession gardening, companion gardening, and you'd be surprised, you would be amazed at the amount of food you can grow in a spot the size of what I've got in this backyard. You do need to check with your city government though. If you live within the city limits, check with your code office and make sure there are no ordinances against raising vegetables in your yard. I've done that. Our code officer is a friend of mine, and so I shot him a text and I said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Is this okay? And in our particular town, there are no ordinances against it. You also may have to check if you're part of an HOA or something like that. They may have some restrictions against whether or not you can do this if you're part of a subdivision. We are not. We're just in an addition to the city, so I don't have to worry about that. But you can do this. And over the next few weeks, next few months, hopefully the videos that I post will help you see that you can do this. And we may even make a couple of videos about building structures and stuff like that. I planted 2 more grapevines this week, and they're going to need an arbor to grow up. So we may take one day and build an arbor and those kinds of things. So until we can get back together, if you like this video, hit like, subscribe to it, share it if you would like to, and happy gardening. This is Jamie, and thanks for hanging out with me in my experimental garden.